Howdy Summoners, and welcome back to another episode of OP Patch Predictions. I'm Tia, and today we'll be talking about some of the changes coming on patch 11.9 and how they may change, or fail to change, the state of the game. Let's get right into it. We're going to start things off by addressing the changes we're seeing to Hecarim. If you haven't already seen them, here's what's coming up. Hecarim's damage ramp on his Q has been lowered, but the ramping has a bonus AD ratio, so with enough attack damage you'll be able to eventually be stronger than before. Eventually. W's healing effect now has a bonus AD ratio added onto the percent of damage that Hecarim heals for, but healing from allies' damage is halved. And lastly, Hecarim's E's base minimum damage is taking a small hit, with the max damage getting a big chunk of damage taken out. These changes are definitely a huge nerf to the more popular tank Hecarim we see in both solo queue and pro play, and the Q nerf will give him a bit of a weaker clear. But don't take this as them gutting the champ. Hecarim is still going to be more than a viable pick. In fact, AD Hecarim will be an even stronger carry in the mid to late stages of the game, once you get enough AD to bring your Q up to and even over the previous ramping it had. A slightly slower clear for a champ that currently has an incredibly fast and healthy clear is still going to leave him better off than most champs. The W change will give you less healing in certain teamfight situations, but it's pretty common to be diving far past the point that your allies can help you anyways as Hecarim, and in those cases, you'll be healing more as you try to bring down the enemy backline. Basically, the takeaway here is that Hecarim is still going to be an S tier pick, potentially even staying as the best pick in the role. This seems sorta like a common theme. Riot is so hesitant about nerfing its champ to the ground that they put out nerfs that seem more like adjustments, and the champ goes on to reign for months. Just look at Camille. In the right hands, that champ is still one of the strongest carries in the game, and it seems like she's been that way for like a year now. And that brings us to today's question of the day. What other champs have been too OP for too long? I think a lot of champs fall into this, mostly because they're heavily slept on as either unpopular picks, such as Skarner, or champs that have their stats skewed due to being hard to play, with first-timers and lower-skilled players bringing their win rate down, such as Camille. But enough about what I think, I want to know your picks down in the comments below. Okay, so back on topic. Here's a quick breakdown of how the two different builds will be on Hecarim now. Tank Hecarim will have much lower damage than before, and will be easier to bring down since he will receive less healing from his W. But it's still a viable playstyle if you want to be able to engage your team and provide disruption. AD Hecarim will be able to carry much harder than the tank build, but since you won't be as beefy, if you don't have the damage to bring down targets, or if you misplay in fights, you'll be susceptible to being blown up. Personally, I think higher risk, higher reward carrying strength is a better sense of balance for a champ like Hecarim. Doing well early and snowballing to carry games, or doing poorly and flopping, is much healthier than a champ that can get the best of both worlds by being able to be a hard carry as a tank with no real weakness. If you do opt for the AD build, which we highly recommend for actually carrying your games, it should look something like this. Go Hailblade, Trinity Force, Plated Steel Caps or Merc Treads, Sterix Gauge, Death Stance, and Spirit Visage. Your last item can be situational, but some options are Guardian Angel, Dead Man's Plate, Force of Nature, and Gargoyle Stoneplate. For runes, you'll run Conqueror, Triumph, Tenacity, Last Stand, Nimbus Cloak, and Celerity, with your stat runes being double Adaptive Force and Armor. The Phase Rush rune page works too, especially against teams with heavy slows, but this is for maximum carrying potential in general. Next up for discussion, we have another jungler, in Kindred. This champ is actually on the buff list again, and it's actually a decision we question a lot. The problem with this is that even before her buffs back on 11.7, Kindred was a champ that we considered pretty strong. When you put a hard scaling, hyper carry marksman in the jungle, they shouldn't be able to consistently perform in the early game every single game. Yet, that's exactly what it seems like Riot is pushing for. Kindred's strength comes from being able to accumulate marks, giving you buffs to each ability, as well as increased range at certain thresholds. Like I said earlier in the video, hard carry champs should be high risk, high reward. With Kindred, failing to acquire stacks should leave you a liability for your team, while doing well early and securing marks should allow you to be an incredibly strong carry. This could be broken down and argued about in many ways, but it's my opinion that this type of baseline buff for a champ like Kindred is just bad. If you're going to buffer in a way that rewards good players for securing marks, i.e. buffs to the effects that marks give her abilities. She shouldn't be getting buffs that simply make her a better champ no matter what choices you make in the game. If you're interested in actually being able to abuse an OP pick like Kindred, like I said, you'll need to know what you're doing. She isn't the type of carry that can just AFK farm and then you're just winning the game. You need to be able to secure marks, and doing that means having a really strong sense of which marked camps you can contest, when it's safe to invade for one, when you have to give one up, and knowing which lanes are best to gank for easy stacks. Doing this well means you can easily carry fights, but if you don't have a clue on how to path, you'll find yourself being useless game after game. Trust me, we've all been there, and it can be pretty hard to understand these tough concepts like this on your own, but thankfully, we've got your back. At ProGuides.com, our top-tier coaches are ready to help you with all of your needs. So whether you need help with basic concepts and general guidelines like how to path, or more advanced specific things, head on over and book your session now so you can level up your skills and start climbing that ladder. Now, without further ado, let's get on with the video. Much like Kindred, Lulu is yet another champ being buffed that we already have as a top-tier pick. I personally love Lulu, she is bae, but she is pretty easy to play as that she's an enchanter that pretty much anyone can pick up and use, and she's statistically doing well as it is. So why is she being buffed? Maybe there just hasn't been enough space groove sales. Who knows? It's not that the buff is that huge or anything, but a buff is a buff. And with Lulu already being S tier as a support, and being pretty much tied with Janna for the spot of #1 enchanter in the game, it's just kinda crazy to see her somehow being targeted for buffs. But honestly, I'm not complaining because I'm trying to get diamond, so keep on buffing her, Riot. Looking back to the jungle ecosystem, there's a pretty notable nerf, with Chemtank having its movement speed active being slashed from a 60% buff down to 40%. This isn't going to completely remove the item from the game, as it will remain a core piece for someone like Skarner, but it definitely cuts down on the general concept of the dominant speed demon meta we currently see, where people simply lock in a tank with any type of engage and build Chemtank with other tanky movement speed items and run at the enemy team with the press of a button. I think this playstyle is like snooze fest. It's so boring, with many junglers as well as top laners being able to basically play on autopilot and still have the guarantee of being useful in fights thanks to their engage strength, so I'm honestly glad to see this nerf. No more being outdone by jungle player 3755 who locks in a tank, gets outpathed and then outganked, but wins because they can build Chemtank on Volibear and run down your teammates. I'm not mad, you're mad. So what champs will benefit from this nerf? This is basically an indirect buff to any high ganking champ that wants to snowball early and close the game out fast, as well as other scaling champs who opt for more of a carry role in teamfights. With a slight Sunfire buff being pushed out on the same patch, there are some junglers that don't even use Chemtank well who will become pretty powerful picks. So with all that said, basically every non-Chemtank jungler will be better, with the most notable OP picks being those that are already very strong, like Fiddle, Elise, and Rek'Sai. If you prefer to play tanks, Zac and Nunu are easily the best in that category in the role, since they fall into the minority of tanks that don't opt for Chemtank as it is. Before we end things, I just want to say that I'm a wee bit disappointed with this patch. The whole thing is just kind of resident sleeper. Looking at the buff list, no champ is getting a change big enough to warrant a change to their position on the tier list. Take Trundle for example. Trundle is good against tanks, and bad against squishier ranged heavy team comps that can easily kite him. An increase to the slow from his E will make him slightly better when he's already good, but it isn't going to make him suddenly good where he was previously bad. Xerath having more poke is cool, but doesn't change the fact that in most games, there's going to be the threat of being jumped on and one-shot. Full-on poke comps haven't been a thing for some time, simply because hard engage and or assassins are pretty much always in the meta, both of which Xerath is terrible against. In the rare case you end up against neither, he can definitely carry, and this buff will help, but those games are too few and far between to call him an OP pick. Pretty much every other buff on the list falls into this. If the champ was good in a situation before, they'll be better, and if they weren't, you won't suddenly be inclined to lock them in. Looking at the nerfs, we sort of see the same lack of meaningful changes. We already talked about how OP Hecarim is going to continue to be, and every other nerf seems to be pretty much as useless as the buffs. As with Hecarim, a light nerf to the clear speed on Morgana and Diana, who are in the ridiculously fast category for jungle clear speeds, is still going to leave them on the high upper end of clear speeds. Rumble and Garen are two dominant picks in both solo lanes at the moment, and both of their so-called nerfs are so microscopic that they probably won't really change the outcome of any games at all. Not only are these nerfs light in scale, but they also seem pretty misplaced. As I brought up with the question of the day, many champs go months at the top without being nerfed, and this patch is no exception. Darius, Riven, Camille, Wukong, and Garen have all been top 10 picks for top lane for several patches in a row and have never received any significant nerfs. Darius in particular has been one of the most picked and banned champs in the role for, multiple seasons now? And this isn't just an issue in top lane. Fiddlesticks, Galio, Katarina, Vayne, Jhin, Thresh, and my baby Lulu, and Bard are just a few of the champs that have basically been permanently S tier or, at the very worst, high A tier picks. On the flip side, you have champs that Riot seems to be afraid of overbuffing. When was the last time Kog'Maw, Illaoi, or Warwick were S tier picks at the top of their role? I understand League is never going to be perfectly balanced. In fact, I think it's actually good that way. It's fun to find what's most OP, and it's how you see different strategies and metas evolve. But it's also really boring when it's the same group of champs fluctuating back and forth between being really OP and just above average picks, while others remain at the bottom of the barrel. And that about wraps things up for our OP Patch Predictions 11.9 edition. Did you like that voice? I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to sub so you never miss out on any of our content that's like this. Remember to let us know what champs you think have been too good for too long down in the comments below. I have a blast reading your comments, so yeah, leave one. And one last thing, don't forget to check out our Discord in the description box below, where you can discuss League further or just hang out and be part of our community and be our friend. Yay, friends! I can't wait to see you guys back for the next video, but until then, good luck on the Rift. I hope you get Challenge or do 10 push-ups because why not? And just enjoy the nice weather if it's nice, wherever you are in the world. Okay, bye!